Good morning. This is the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. It is Wednesday, July 31st. Lord, it's already July 31st. That's amazing. It's 9 a.m. We will start with the roll call.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Cross.
Present.
Commissioner Mesner.
Here.
Commissioner Oath. Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 4 commissioners present.
4 out of 7 makes a quorum. We exist for purposes of our meeting today. Good to see everybody. We will move into our agenda as scheduled. The first matter is commissioner comments. Does anyone have comments for the good of the cause? All right, seeing none, we've had a busy week. We do have public comment this morning. A certain Don Cameron signed up. Hearings Manager Thomas, can you see if we can locate Mr. Cameron?
We have elevated Mr. Cameron.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners, for
morning.
this opportunity to share a perspective about carbon management from outside of the normally directed impacted areas. I am Don Cameron, a city councilor in the city of Golden. Golden is in a valley between the Front Range foothills and 2 mesas, and of course has Clear Creek flowing through its downtown. The prevailing wind direction is from the west and north. Just last week, I was looking at the EPA's air quality index, and I had to cancel outdoor activities due to hazardous air. The air was poor quality due to a combination of smoke particles and ozone, which brings me to my main request from this commission. Volatile organic compounds that are released during all phases of oil and gas production combine with sunlight to cause ground level ozone. The burning of flare gas also produces NOx due to the high temperatures and therefore also leads to the production of ground level ozone. One of the challenges that you no doubt face is that a given well site, a given set of wells, or even a large production or compressor site may not on its own violate any release levels that have been set for approval. But we don't live in a world with stovepiped air ascending to the edge of space. When I was taking engineering courses in college, we were usually taught that a reasonable assumption about a system is that it is, quote, perfectly mixed. And whether perfectly mixed or imperfectly mixed, the reality is that air from north of Golden, even as far as Canada, makes it to our little town. Drilling in Weld County and other regions in northern Colorado absolutely affect our air quality. We are in the EPA non-attainment area for ozone, and despite our concerted efforts on electrification, improvements to our bike and pedestrian infrastructure, electrification of small handheld maintenance equipment, and more, we will be unable to meet our goals for greenhouse gas and ozone reduction without a statewide team effort. I plead with you to consider the aggregate effects of your work, how you address this in your quasi-judicial hearings and comply with existing regulations is hard. But one thing that comes to mind is to require a series of permits in a given area that alone may not violate release targets to be aggregated instead. I would guess that industry representatives consciously limit their permit requests to, quote, stay below the radar, but that doesn't change their absolute emissions overall. In fact, it may be that you have to ask for greater authority from the legislature to regulate permits in a way that account for their contribution to our current situation. And if you've not considered or not using a cap and trade system, I would ask you to consider doing so. Our current situation is one in which we are releasing too many ozone precursors into the environment, full stop. Can we identify the biggest contributors that exist now and hold them accountable? What we can't do is continue advanced permits that contribute to this problem and can claim, quote, negligible impact. All impacts are real, cumulative, and impact downwind residents of Colorado. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilmember Cameron, for participating with us this morning. I would note that we do have a cumulative impacts rulemaking scheduled. It's scheduled for September 3rd. If you would like to bring your perspective to that, that is an area in which we would be tackling some of the issues that you have addressed this morning. So thank you very much for your time.
I appreciate your response. Thank you.
All right, commissioners, we will continue on our agenda. We have consent agenda. Does anyone have questions with regard to consent? Seeing none, does anyone want to make a motion on consent?
Move to approve consent.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve consent. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Next and finally on our docket this morning is docket number 221100286. It is a financial assurance plan for Evergreen Natural Resources. We would need to elevate attorneys Matt Lepore and Jim Martin. Good morning, Mr. Lepore.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners.
And good morning, Mr. Martin.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Chair.
And I see you've elevated Mike Joy. Is he your witness for today?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And let's follow normal protocol and have AAG Davenport go ahead and get him sworn in. Or maybe it's AAG Mercer. I'm not sure who's our acting AAG this morning.
It's me, Chair.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Joy, would you please raise your hand, state your name, and say that you swear to tell the truth?
I am Michael Joy, President and Chief Operating Officer of Evergreen Natural Resources, and I swear to tell the truth this morning.
Thank you.
All right, without further ado, the panel is yours, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning again, everyone. We have made the introduction, so I will skip that part. We are here before you this morning for a continuance of Evergreen's Financial Assurance Plan application. We were last before you on April 3rd of this year. At the conclusion of that hearing, the Commission was circling the airport looking for a place to land the plane, as Commissioner McGowan put it. At the Chair's suggestion, the Commission continued this matter and appointed Commissioner Cross to work directly with Evergreen to resolve a few remaining concerns commissioners had expressed about Evergreen's proposed Option 5 plan. Evergreen and Council met with Commissioner Cross twice, first on April 12th and again on April 25th. We would like to thank Commissioner Cross for his time and his thoughtful, solution-oriented approach to modifying Evergreen's financial assurance plan. We hope this will help us find an open runway and bring this long and turbulent flight to a successful conclusion. At our first meeting, we agreed there were three key issues Evergreen needed to address. Number one, provide a more detailed asset retirement plan that includes, quote, triggering events for plugging, abandoning, and reclaiming wells. And consider establishing a third-party trust fund like a modified Option 3 plan that Evergreen would pay into over time to build up a plugging, abandonment, and reclamation fund. Second, clarification on the scope of Evergreen's analysis of its demonstrated reclamation costs, specifically whether Evergreen had analyzed only its low-producing wells when it came up with his demonstrated reclamation cost, or whether it had analyzed all of its wells. And third, additional information to support Evergreen's use of the Commission's default plugging and abandonment cost of $10,000 per well. At our second meeting with Commissioner Cross, Evergreen outlined a series of substantial revisions to its financial assurance plan to address those three issues. Following additional guidance from Commissioner Cross, Evergreen formalized the proposed revisions to its financial assurance plan in Addendum 5, Supplemental Information, and in Exhibit 5 to Addendum 1, both of which were filed with the Commission on June 13th. I will review the highlights of the solutions Evergreen has proposed and the additional information it has provided for each of the three issues. First, as to the asset retirement plan, Evergreen now proposes to establish a third-party, interest-bearing plugging, abandonment, and reclamation trust fund through which Evergreen will fund 100% of its plugging, abandonment, and reclamation liability over the demonstrated life of its field, starting immediately. This effectively is a modified option 3 plan as Commissioner Messner has suggested, and it also addresses the concerns that former Commissioner McGowan expressed about paying into a fund over time. Addendum 5 contains 2 compound interest calculations using a calculator from the Securities and Exchange Commission that show that that fund would hold $45 million in 35 years, which is the life of the field, and it will hold $12 million in 20 years. Additionally, Evergreen will keep its current financial assurance surety bond of $1.725 million in place until such time as the trust fund holds twice that amount. Evergreen has identified and included in its asset retirement plan in Addendum 5 4 triggering events that are indicators of when a well should be placed on a plugging list. And in addition to that, there are 3 further aspects of its asset retirement plan on pages 4 through 6 of Addendum 5. With respect to demonstrated reclamation costs, Evergreen calculated its demonstrated reclamation costs based on all 2,263 of its wells and related oil and gas locations. In its prior filings, Evergreen provided supporting documentation for its low-producing wells, but not the 2,003 other non-low producing wells, simply because the data was so voluminous. We now provided all of the supporting data to the Commission in Exhibit 5 to Addendum 1. That was provided in hard copy 3-ring binders. I think there were 3 of them, as well as electronically on a flash drive. Based on the weighted average of its wells using a high, medium, low complexity matrix, as we discussed last hearing, Evergreen's demonstrated reclamation cost across its entire portfolio of 2,200 wells is $11,852. As to the plugging and abandonment costs, Evergreen used the Commissioner's single well financial assurance default plugging and abandonment amount of $10,000 for a well that is less than 4,000 feet deep. All but 2 of Evergreen's 2,263 wells are less than 4,000 feet deep. Evergreen believes its actual plugging and abandonment costs will be less than $10,000 per well. Exhibit 3 to Addendum 5 is an authorization for expenditure, otherwise known as an AFE, showing that the total P&A costs for a well of less than 4,000 feet are $7,900, or about 20% less than the default amount that Evergreen used in calculating its financial assurance. Adding Evergreen's demonstrated cost and the $10,000 plugging and abandonment cost gives a total PA&R cost of $21,852 per well. Other factors, such as multi-well pads, where the reclamation costs would be spread among more than one well, and surface owner variances reducing reclamation areas will make Evergreen's total plugging, abandonment, and reclamation costs substantially lower. Again, we'd like to thank Commissioner Cross for his assistance in this, and we look forward to answering questions that you may have.
Okay, thanks for that information. Did Mr. Joy have anything further, or is he here for questions?
He is here for questions, Mr. Chair.
All right. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lepore, Mr. Joy, Mr. Martin, for submitting the modified financial assurance plan. I think there's lots of good things about it. I did have a couple of questions so that I better understand what the proposal is. The main question I have is in the calculations of the compound interest and the determination of the money available, over the lifetime of the well. and I'm not a financial expert, and so this probably is in the information that you submitted, but my understanding is that the proposal is to allow those funds to reimburse plugging and abandonment activities as they occur. Where I'm missing information, I think, is how that affects that compound interest as you're pulling money out of that fund over time. It appears that the compound interest was calculated as if that wasn't going to occur, but maybe I missed that.
Actually,
Mr. Joy?
Commissioner Messner, you haven't in fact missed anything. What we did was made the assumption that the trust corpus will be funded on an annual basis at a $250,000 amount, which reaches those numbers. What it's designed to do is actually seek reimbursement in two ways. One, in years or periods in which ENR does actual plugging, abandonment, and reclamation, we would withhold the equivalent amount, so the actual costs that we incur. So if you did one well, for instance, in 1 year, you'd withhold $21,850. And you're correct that the computations don't go through a series of iterations to show the effect on the trust when you reduce it. But correspondingly, it also would have to then go through and reduce the number of wells that would be essentially that you're funding. So really what you get is a dollar for dollar exchange for all intent and purposes. You could review this, of course, pursuant to the commission's rules over time to make sure that the trust is functioning as it's designed. But the starting place is, in fact, that you're funding the trust for all of them. And as you do the plugging, abandonment, and reclamation, that money doesn't go in, but of course that liability is also taken off of the plugging, abandonment, and reclamation calculation.
Okay, thank you. I understand the concept now.
Okay.
Further questions from Commission? Commissioner Ackerman?
Thank you. Just seeking further clarification on that point, Mr. Joy, if you'll permit me. I took that to mean what you just said, that there's a $250,000 contribution to the trust annually. But if you plug and abandon or reclaim any wells during that time period, the amount used would be deducted from the contribution, from the annual contribution to the trust.
Correct.
Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, we're following the ECMC definition. So it's essentially, think of it in terms of a drawdown trust. So if we're putting in 250,000, we plug, abandon, or reclaim one well, which costs 20,000. In that year, you would put in 230,000. Receipts get submitted to the ECMC, of course, for review. I think the basic provisions or parameters of the trust are actually set forth in the definition of the rules.
Thanks for restating. I appreciate that.
Certainly.
Further questions for the panel? All right, seeing no further questions, we move into deliberations, gentlemen. Commissioner Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to thank Mr. Lepore, Mr. Martin, and Mr. Joy for the time that they took to meet with me and to go over some of the commission's concerns based on our previous hearings. I recognize that this has been an arduous process. I know that we've had several iterations of attempts to kind of get this across the finish line. But in my opinion, I do think we are in a good place for moving forward in this situation. I think for those listening in the public, I want to highlight that this is a unique situation, and both for stakeholders and for operators as well. For other operators, I don't think that an option 5 plan should be your first guess of what to do. I think we're very clear in the rules that this is not something designed to pay less. And I think what you'll see here is Evergreen Natural Resources is not paying less under this. And I think the key point here is that we're in a unique situation where, similar to Own Resources, which is the only other approved financial 5, we are facing a situation where these are considered low producing wells, but these are not wells that are at risk of being orphaned in the near future. I believe it was last October when we had the first hearing, we spent a lot of time hearing testimony on both Evergreen's financial capabilities, as well as the reserves that are in it, that are available for them. And I think it is very clear that there are reserves that can continue to be extracted for the next 30 years, even at a low cost. And I think that kind of situation is what makes this a unique situation, that we are not at risk of orphaning these wells. And so therefore, we're now in a place where we can achieve single well financial assurance just over a longer period of time than we would under other options. And I think that's the key thing for me in this. During some of the previous hearings, I know that I expressed concerns, particularly with the asset retirement plan. I do appreciate the work and amendments that have gone into the asset retirement plan. Previously, we heard everything from, we don't really plan to plug and abandon wells to, we'll plug and abandon when they need to be plugged and abandoned per the rules. And that's not really a plan of what is going to happen. And I appreciate the work that's gone into detail what kind of trigger events will be taking place that would lead to a plugging and abandonment of wells, particularly with respect to mechanical issues. But I also think that having this unique trust fund set up is a good way to deal with the asset retirement plan. Over the next 30 years, as these wells are being operated, again, this works like single well financial assurance. There will be money put into this trust that will be able to plug and abandon and reclaim all 2,263 wells that Evergreen operates in Colorado. And I think that's really a key part of it. And so while there has been additional information put in place that explains when wells will be plugged and abandoned and when areas will be reclaimed, I do think it's critical to show that part of the asset retirement plan is enough money is being put in to plug and abandon and reclaim all 2,263 wells. One of the other things that does stick out to me is I do appreciate the conservative approach that Evergreen is using for their plugging and abandonment costs and reclamation costs. Going back to the initial hearing for this, one of the key parts of the director's recommendation, while they did not recommend approval of the plan, they did recognize that the demonstrated costs were appropriate that were shown. We oftentimes get operators that suggest demonstrated costs that are within their own costs. Here we've received a third party AFE, which I think is important. There have been significant amounts of work done to show that the reclamation costs for all 2,263 wells has been thoughtfully produced and set out and explained to us. I do appreciate the additional information being sent to us on that. And I think for future operators, I think it's important that the more information you provide to us, the better. I know sometimes it seems like it's a lot of information and there's no way we're going to look through it, but I promise you, at least for this commissioner, I look through all the information that comes in, whether it's engineering testimony, data, or anything else. And so I think it is important that the more information, the more backup you provide to us, the better. And so I do appreciate that information coming through is helpful. I would note that Mr. Lepore commented on the fact that there may be variances requested by surface owners that may lower the cost. And while I appreciate that, it's not something that we can guarantee, because a variance is something that may or may not happen. But at the same time, we're also recognizing that these reclamation costs do not take those variances into account. So yes, this actually may be less to reclaim, but they're not trying to claim a lower number for reclamation costs than it actually will be. And so I think that is helpful as well. And again, staff agreed with the demonstrated costs, and I think that's important. And given that it may actually be less per well than our $10,000 default amount, for 2,261 of their wells. I do think it's appropriate to use that default amount to make sure that we're not leaving money on the table and making sure that funds may not be there for plugging abandonment and reclamation costs. Overall, I do think that this is an approvable financial assurance plan. I think it's a big part of it to me is using this trust fund that will create single well financial assurance just over a different time period than you would under some of the other options. And I think overall that's really the main sticking point for me on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Cross, for the comments, and thank you for stepping up and serving to help provide some guidance on this for the commission and for the applicant. Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think that this is a much improved plan over what was initially being proposed. I think it does meet our rule requirements. I think the operator has shown that it does not meet the requirements of an option 3 operator. It would have naturally been categorized as an option 2 operator. I think the operator has shown that there's a unique situation and has provided adequate evidence that it's not able to access the bonding mechanisms that would allow it to bond for option 2, which I would categorize as exceptional circumstances. This new proposal does not attempt to redefine low producing wells, which in my opinion is not allowed within our rules. I think that the retirement plan that was provided was adequate. I think, as I indicated, even with the first plan, they provided adequate information to show demonstrated cost. They provided adequate information to show the life, anticipated life of the field. I think that the structure of this is a modified option 3 structure, which was contemplated in the rules to be able to allow the utilization of demonstrated costs and to potentially extend those payments over the lifetime of the field. And so I find that this meets the rules and would be in support of it.
Thank you, Commissioner Messner. Further deliberative thoughts? Commissioner Ackerman?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I don't have a ton to add, but I'm in generally the same category. It looks like this is shaping up to be quite a short hearing, but the pathway in arriving here has been anything but short and easy. I appreciate the continued ongoing work on this issue by Evergreen Natural Resources. They're forward-looking and innovative thinking in trying to devise a financial plan that is fit for this operator, which is operating with assets that are significantly unique in Colorado. I also appreciate the voluminous information that was submitted. I'll admit my eyes are a bit fuzzy, but it was very helpful to be able to review the documentation that you sent over. Wanted to reiterate, as we have in previous hearings, that this is an operator in good financial standing with significant community support. And I believe that you've addressed the detailed points that we've raised in all of our previous hearings. And just wanted to state that I'm also grateful for Commissioner Cross's expertise and insight and coordination helping bring this issue home. I think he's done so appropriately, and also believe this is an approvable financial assurance plan.
Appreciate the comments, and I appreciate an acknowledgement to Commissioner Cross for the good work done here. Commissioner Cross, would you like to make a motion?
I would move for approval of the now modified financial assurance plan proposed by Evergreen Natural Resources.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the modified financial assurance plan. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Martin and Mr. Lepore and Mr. Joy for the work here. As Commissioner Ackerman noted, today's hearing may be short, but it is the culmination of a lot of good work and a lot of time and effort that allow the applicant to get to a place where they unanimously have received approval for their financial assurance plan. So we appreciate that.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, commissioners.
Thank you, commissioners.
Commissioners, unlike yesterday and Friday, this is a short hearing. We have accomplished the business on the agenda for today. Would look for a motion to adjourn and to get ready for the continued hearing on Friday.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. I see you all as indicated on Friday for the continuation of the Lowry Cap hearing.